Hi, everybody. Thanks a million for joining us today. I'm so delighted to be joined by Cidgem, who is founder of Simple Works and author of Decodable books. Cidgem, thanks a million for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on, Una. I'm so happy to be talking to you.
No problem. It's such a pleasure. It's so great to have people's insights and further wealth of experience. Cidgem has such a vast range of personal experience, both at home and obviously in her professional capacity. Hopefully today we'll provide some tips and suggestions for parents and teachers throughout hopefully Dyslexia Awareness Month about trying to create and generate awareness for people, struggling with learning difficulties. So Cidgem, maybe just fire ahead and give us a bit of a background to yourself first, and then we can go into some further details.
Sure, definitely. So I'm a mom of a dyslexic son, and he was diagnosed just before he turned 7 at the end of age 6. And we were lucky to have him diagnosed. He did mention that he was having difficulty. He was very good in math. He said, I can't do math. And we digged a little bit more, asked questions. And you remember we're talking to a 6-year-old, so you really have to dig, and ask the right questions, because they literally just answer the question you're asking. They don't understand the larger context and talking about emotions and what might be going in their head. So he said, I can't do word problems. And we knew he was not a fluent reader. He was struggling, and we started asking questions, at the school, like, is there a problem? And I understand he was young and he's very energetic. So they said, it's too early, just wait a little bit. He was in first grade at that point. And but I felt like there was something happening on the in addition to what he has mentioned. We also started seem like acting differently, sometimes acting out.
Okay.
He started being like a class clown in class, which we kind of heard from the teacher. We saw similar behavior at home when it was time for doing homework, or mostly they had 20 minutes of free reading. So he's a very charming boy. We would always find a way around it and try to avoid the tasks on hand if he didn't want to do it when it was around reading. So I started kind of connecting the dots, and I said, there's something here. And I started asking around, and I was very lucky because a few years before, one of my daughter's moms, my daughter is older, has mentioned that her daughter had dyslexia, and kind of gave me a snapshot of what dyslexia is at 10,000 feet. And I think I'm seeing some similar things, and I'm like, what was that word she was talking about? So I called her. She said, you mean dyslexia? I was like, yeah, how do you spell that? So I started doing my Google search, and in a very short time, I was convinced that he either was dyslexic or he had something similar to dyslexia where it was affecting his reading. We got him tested, and the diagnosis came as dyslexia, and this was just before his 7th birthday. So things were happening really quickly, and we got him a Wilson teacher. It's a program that is Ortam Gilligan based, and because the gap hasn't really opened up between him and his peers in his class, and with the OG based system, which is an approach which is really how dyslexic kids learn, we were very, very blessed and lucky that he started reading relatively soon. It was a lot of hard work. I don't want to make it sound like it was easy. A lot of tears, a lot of sleepless nights on my end, reading, tens and tens of books, trying to understand how I can help. Just because, remember, like, I haven't even heard the word dyslexia a few months before. And he started, picking up in about maybe 6 months or so. He started understanding the short vowels and some of the basic consonants. And he read Hop and Puff by Dr. Seuss, and he was so proud. It's like 238 words. It's a fun, small book with lots of great illustrations. And he's like, I'm ready to read chapter books like my friends do. And I'm like, oh, okay, we need to make sure we find the right chapter books, because I knew that he wasn't ready by any means to read the books that his friends were reading. I tried for a while. So now we're, when this is happening, first grade is ending, he's entering second grade. And I couldn't find any of these books. so I said, and I did realize that he had to practice, because it just, when what he was taught in the tutoring section just wasn't enough. He had to, we did it like 45 minutes to an hour twice a week, which is what's recommended. But I felt like if he was struggling that much, he had to practice more, but there was nothing to practice. And if I gave him a babyish book, he wouldn't like it. If I give him a book that he would enjoy, he would start crying because the words were so difficult. And I didn't want him to be frustrated and believe that he didn't like reading, because that was the next thing that was starting to happen. He was like, I don't like books, I don't like reading, which I knew wasn't the case, because he loved being read to. So we kind of struggled there for a little bit. And then I said, I'm going to write it. And I would sit outside his tutoring room and, kind of listen what they're learning. So I knew what his skills were at that point. At school, they had the sight word keychain where, he would have to memorize, which now looking back, I see how useless that was. He would just he would just memorize words, and I knew what he could read. So I started writing our first book, Sam is Stuck, for him. And I would write, a few paragraphs, and he would read it. And as he kind of read a little bit, I wrote more, and the whole book came together based on what he likes and what he would find entertaining. And from then, it was second, third book, and now we have 15 books at 2 different levels. And now we're also working on a third level, more advanced, where our books would have a control R, magic E, and double vowels like OO and EE, because that seems to be the next level that there's a gap out in the market. So
fabulous. Yeah, exceptional. So obviously there's so much to unpack there. Thank you for giving us such a great whistle top tour. I'm sure you're used to saying it so many times. You're like, I'll start here and I'll finish here. But it's great, obviously from somebody, that's a mom that's at home, that you've seen your own child struggling and then was able to, be so proactive and take the steps, and then obviously provide the support, but then also then come up with your own kind of creative way. Tell me, Cidgem, how did you, let's say, go about, let's say, how you phrased the books or how you put them together first day, or the layout, or things that you found were useful for your son and other dyslexic students?
That's a great question. And I'm going to take one step back to explain why I do what I do. So I don't have an English major. You can clearly tell English is not my first language. Growing up, anything with words was difficult. I was never diagnosed with dyslexia. But my native language is Turkish, and it's very phonetic. So I don't know if I have it or not. On one of the interviews, I was on the spot for doing like, are you dyslexic test, and they believe that I am. But regardless, I was good with numbers, so I'm an engineer, and I understand systems. I'm really good at process and process improvement. So when people were like, did you always wanted to be an author? I said, no, definitely no. And I did not want to write a story after an experience in 7th grade where we had to write a story. And it was, maybe, 10 pages in a Word document. Wow. And I poured my heart. I read so many, I knew what genre I wanted to read, and I read a lot of books in that genre. And I say a lot, I mean 3, and 3 was a lot. Like, I never read books growing up. It all started after college for me. And I kind of found that, there's a theme, there's an opening scene, and there's characters, and then there's a problem, there's a guide who's helping, and then something happens that like the character gets into this, big dilemma, and then there's a happy ending. And I thought that's going to be the path I'll follow when I'm trying to write this 10-page document, which was very haunting for me. And I finished it, and the teacher said, get less help next time. And I was devastated. Like, nobody spoke English in my family to even help me. This was an English literature assignment I had to write in English, and I was truly devastated, saying like, you really have no faith in me. Like, what do I expect? I don't have faith in me either. And that was it for me. So fast forward, that was in 7th grade, so decades. Here I am, I'm trying to write a book, and I'm like, oh my God, like, this is going to be horrible. So my goal was write 200 words 3 times a week, usually when my son was at soccer and I had to, sit in the car, and at that time it was cold weather too, so the parents weren't during practice, watching the kids. So I said, that's a solid 45 minutes. I can write 200 words, more or less. So that's kind of how it started. So what I did was I initially pulled the vocabulary that he knew and the phonics rules that he learned, and I started putting that together. But now, as an author and a publisher, I understand that what he knew is not what the general population at that age and at that level knows. So what I do is I create a story that is decodable. So what that means is, for example, I get the request about writing about soccer. That kids like, oh, we want to have a book about soccer, but it's so difficult because soccer, field, coach, game are not decodable at the level that I was writing. So I always say, I'm sorry, not yet, but in the next level there will be one. So I find a story that is somewhat decodable. Some main activities, main parts of the book can be easier words. And then I start writing. And my husband is in IT, so he has created a software that I throw the story in every so often, and it throws me back all the words and what the counts are. And I kind of start weeding. It is really like, you cut the grass first, it looks nice, and then you go and start weeding. Because if there are a few words on a page, I think they say like if one or two words on a page that are hard for a reader, that's the right reading level. That doesn't apply for dyslexic kids. That is way too many. I would say a few words in a book is probably where I would like to be.
Completely.
So I start reading, and that reading takes sometimes a year or 18 months, and that's okay. I usually have a lot of books in the pipeline. Initially, I had larger or longer chapters. Like if you look at our Samizdat, which is the first book, we have 6 chapters. And then the second and third book became a bit smaller. And then because when my son is reading, I see like he goes to where's the chapter at? And he would like, oh my God, like this is, 15 pages. And he would like, oh, this is too much. And I realized that having a chapter read accomplishment in their mind is a very good emotional push for them or encouragement for them to say, I can read another one. I can read another one. So from then on, we really shorten our chapters. So instead of like 6 in Samizdat, the other books usually have 20, 26 chapters. The story is pretty much the same, but same, level for interest. But, we have shorter breaks for the kids to take a break. We don't do any illustrations in the book. Samizdat has a few, and the other 2 have the chapter illustrations. But what I know is what my son was doing, and I know this is very common, and unfortunately there are some teachers who also encourage this, is to use illustrations as context clues. And that is really not reading. You really have to decode. And we realized that for those kids who were encouraged to use context clues, is losing focus on the story and decoding and trying to figure out like it's in there, like what can it be? So we took those out in all the future books as well. So they can really focus on what's on the page, which is only the letters. We have a very good spacing. I can actually show you. This is one of our best sellers. I love this cover. So you can see how much space there is. So they're not overwhelmed.
Wow. Loads of space, between them, and the margins are very good too.
And we don't have large paragraphs because sometimes early on, parents or teachers and the readers could be swapping or taking turns to read. And another thing I have seen was he would like, okay, I'm here. Second will be mom, third is me, fourth will be mom, fifth is me. And he would try to figure out if he's hitting a long paragraph. So by making every paragraph somewhat the same, but never too big, also I think kind of gives them the confidence that they can focus on reading. They don't have to worry about where they're hitting. So this is one of our best sellers. You can see the spacing on the pages. There's a lot of empty space. Because what I have also realized is long paragraphs and a lot of text on a page also overwhelms not just the there. I always wanted to pick a book and understand what words are there, so I could in my mind say this is a good reading level for my son or not. And the only ones I could find were the really babyish books that had 16 to 32 pages and a few hundred words. So so in our books you can see that we have a word count and the frequency of the word, which also isn't really common in any of the books that I know of. We can kind of understand that is a bit difficult, but it might be used once or twice. And you can say, oh, this is where I could maybe pre-study that word. Or you can say, well, this is really easy. We have learned this and he has passed on to a higher level. This is not the right level for my reader. Another thing I included here, which is, again, that this is like, I'm saying that all my sounds sound, but it's really, he was my, I think, my test market. We have a certificate of.
Oh, lovely.
And it is a big accomplishment. Over 7,000 words, right? This is a big book for them to read. And you can get those on our website colored as well. And I love seeing emails with attachments of kids, with their certifications, and they tag me on social media when they finish a book and they have the book and the certificate. Those are just priceless, I think.
Lovely. No, it's so great. And as you said, that the layout of it and how they're easy to decode, and I suppose the easeability of reading. And I suppose, Cidgem, just to link in with, I suppose, it being Dyslexia Awareness Month, and all the parents and teachers at home, or anything like that, but primarily I suppose for parents, any tips and suggestions that you would think would be useful for parents during this time now to help their own children at home with reading, or accessibility of books?
Definitely. So I see the goal of reading as comprehension. If you are not really understanding what you're reading, then goal there. So I think it's very important for a reader to understand what the words are, meaning they have the vocabulary. So I can fluently read a word, but if I don't know what it means and the context it comes in, then I wouldn't be understanding what it's trying to tell. Again, decoding is very important, especially when they are at the earlier stages of their reading journey. It has to be words that they can easily decode, and they can a mistake. I would say, don't correct them saying you made a mistake, saying, let's go back and try that again. And then let them read slowly and maybe say, focus, slowly read it, instead of saying, oh, that was a mistake, and try to correct it, especially if they made a mistake. I would say, don't say the right word. Let them just slow down and read and decode on their own. Once they decode, I would say, go back and read that last sentence and continue, because our memory can really hold 7 to 10 and they're reading, they probably forgot the earlier words in that sentence. So going back and reading helps with comprehension, and it is a good skill as well. I sometimes run into a word that in English I don't know. I do a little search on what it means, and I said, oh, what was I even reading? And I do have comprehension issues, to be honest. So that is, I think, a good strategy, even as they grow older and as they go into high school and college, where the material becomes pretty significantly difficult. Then I think the fun part, the leisure reading, is so important. Completely. Now yeah. I'm looking back and to my childhood, and I realize how much I missed on all these classics and fun reading time. So I would say read with your child. If you don't have the time to make it like a special, event where you're under a blanket and you're reading and they're listening. Audiobooks are fantastic options. There are a lot of free ones. There are a lot of apps there you can have access to audiobooks. There are websites there where if you are diagnosed with dyslexia, you can have free access to audiobooks. Libraries are a great option. So I would say, just, expose them to different things and I would say make sure they understand listening is no different than reading. Is, again, comprehension is the goal. As long as they're understanding what the material is, how they read is irrelevant, I think.
Fabulous. No, completely agree with you. Audiobooks and, you know,
They
I
do have
suppose
to understand. They do read.
exactly, yeah, and having fun topics, you know, and having some element of engagement as well is great. So Chidam, any last minute kind of, you know, all-rounded tips or suggestions before we conclude today's video?
To parents, I would say, if you feel like something is off and your gut is saying, yeah, I don't know if there's, you know, if this is all going the way it should, I would say don't wait, you know, search for, you know, options at your school privately if that's available, and kind of start looking into it. If your school, sometimes, you know, they're wonderful teachers, they just don't know about dyslexia. I would say educate yourself, educate the teachers, educate the district and the administrators in school, and make sure you become the best advocate you can for your child. But also, if depending on the child's age, of course, but have them advocate for themselves as well, because you won't be at school all the time. And if they're not getting one of the accommodations, they should have the something wrong here. I should be getting this. And I realize that comes as they're getting older and teenagers. But I feel like if you start early, if they're diagnosed earlier, if they have that, you know, power early on, maybe they don't use it, but it's in them. I think it's harder to teach those skills to a teenager if they haven't been given those tools early on.
Completely, yeah, I suppose it's about that early intervention really, and trying to, you know, best combat, you know, and work with things at a young age, which is, you know, the way forward really for all of us. Perfect. Thank you so much, Chidam, for joining us today. It's been so lovely having you on to provide all your tips and suggestions. Obviously, feel free to, you know, any of our viewers to link in with Chidam or research some of her books if you have any dyslexic kids at home or know of anybody that would be interested in linking in with Chidam's books. Chidam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
No problem.